Sanmanani Dumalan, good evening and welcome to episode 382 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamantungwa Kumalo. It's a Thursday edition of the Private Property Podcast. If you join us for the first time, welcome to the family. You tuned into the leading property podcast in the country, the only one that comes to your screens every single weekday. And of course, to make sure that you go to our Facebook or YouTube page to catch up on all the great episodes that you have already missed out on. And all our regular viewers on Instagram, on YouTube, and on Facebook, welcome to it. You know how we do. Every single weekday, you and I have an appointment at 7 p.m. where I'm always in conversation with a property expert who helps us navigate our property journey. And doesn't matter where we are along our property journey, whether you're looking to buy, to sell, to build, you're a tenant, you're a landlord, this certainly is the show that helps you along the way. And of course, the other thing that we love doing here across Private Property's social media pages is bringing you a whole host of other shows that you can certainly watch every single weekday at 8 p.m. As it is a Thursday, you can catch Umbali Nogo on the Farming Podcast, and she's on your screens on Tuesdays at the same time. And every Mondays and Fridays, Chad brings you the Home Shoppers Show, where he takes you through incredible properties that you can find on www.privateproperty.co.za. And on Wednesdays, catch Esty Clarkson on the First Time Home Buyers Show, where she always brings you doses of incredible stories from people who've not only walked that first time home buying journey, but have certainly gone on to grow their property portfolios from strength to strength. And of course, there's myself, Uzamantungwa Kumalo, every single weekday at 7 p.m., helping you along in your property needs. Now, one of the things that you're going to find on our Facebook page, remember to follow us across our social media pages, and we are on all the major ones, from your LinkedIn, your TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, you name it. We're absolutely there. Is that you'll find that on our Facebook page, we are running a great competition where every single weekday you stand a chance of walking away with 500 rands in cash. And all you have to do is to share with us some of the great property insight and knowledge that you've picked up while watching the show. And if we call your name, you have to drop us a message while we are still live in order to claim your prize. It's that simple to walk away with cash right here on the Private Property Podcast. So do make sure that you get typing, get commenting on that pinned post on our Facebook page. Now, talking about that, I'll share some of the great responses that we've already had from some of the viewers at home. So you can look forward to that later on. And we'll be sharing some of the ones that so many of you have shared with us along the way. But to kickstart our conversation this evening, it's something that I'm very excited for, especially for the property investors, because I think one of the big things as property investors is we're always trying to find different ways to run our property portfolio better, as efficiently as possible, but also to grow our property portfolio as best as we can. And this evening, we're going to be looking at how technology is increasing opportunity and returns for investment. And I'm joined by Scott Picken, who is the CEO and founder at Wealth Migrate. Scott, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Zama, and thanks very much for having us online. Always passionate to share with people in the space, and so I look forward to hopefully adding value to all your listeners tonight.
It's such a pleasure to have you with us, Scott. And I think that a really great starting point for the listeners at home is perhaps first just paint a picture of when we look at just general technological advances within the real estate sector in South Africa relative to some of our counterparts, perhaps in the US or the UK. Perhaps just share, highlight of what the scene looks like in the local market and some of the opportunities that are still there for the local investors.
Look, I think the world is just literally opening up for local investors. To put it in perspective, the SEC passed the Jobs Act in 2013 in America, which effectively made real estate crowdfunding legal. We were the very first company or platform to get the license at the end of last year. So if you put it into perspective, and that was in South Africa and Africa as a whole, that's 7 years later, to put it in perspective. And so what's happening for South African investors now is they're truly getting access to the same opportunities that have been available in America for quite a long time. However, they're happening fast, and it's definitely not going to take 7 years to catch up. So as investors, I think what's truly exciting now is you can invest in South Africa in a local property here from, in some cases, as little as R1, sometimes even up to R1,000. But at the same time, you can also invest in England, Australia, America, Europe, and you can do that from, 1,000, 1,500 Rand, $100, £100. And I think that's truly exciting, Zama, because where we were as investors, when you and I were kind of starting out in the investment stage, really, what was the only opportunity? Was to go buy a house. That was it. That was the only opportunity.
Yeah.
You went and read a book.
Or REITs, but I think so many of us just didn't know REITs, right? Like that was just like this thing we didn't know. So nobody actually considered that an alternative. It was you're buying a house, and that's pretty much it. I don't think you considered yourself a property investor if you were into REITs. Yeah.
And look, to be honest, like a REIT has a higher than 70% correlation with the stock market. So a lot of people think it's a property investment. It's not. It's a financial asset that is, got a higher than 70% correlation with the stock market. So again, if you look at it from what I just said there, 20 years ago, you and me, I mean, all we were doing was we would read a book, we'd go on a course, and we'd try to go buy a house. Like that was it. Okay. What we've got now is so much more opportunity, and it allows us to learn while doing as well. So the one thing I've learned, I bought my first house when I was 22 years old. I did my first house in London when I was 24. I did my first development in my early 20s, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I know that I'm slightly abnormal from many. However, what I have learned over the last 23 years is I've made a lot of mistakes during that process. And the one thing with investing is you are going to make mistakes. Like if you don't think you're going to make mistakes, it's like learning to walk and thinking you're going to get it right the first time. It ain't going to happen. But the beauty with what they call fractional investing, which is smaller amounts of money, is you can get started and you can make mistakes and you can learn while doing. And that's just going to put you in a far, far stronger position. So unfortunately, I could spend the entire podcast talking about all the advantages, but the most important thing for me is two things for the investors. The first is that they've now got access to opportunities they never had access to before, whether it's, not just the house, but the entire development. The entire shopping center, the entire medical building, the entire industrial complex, which is truly where the wealthy have made their money in commercial property, and everyone's got access to that. And the second thing that I think is truly exciting is they can diversify. They can diversify across countries, they can diversify across assets, they can diversify across currencies, and they can even diversify across partners, because even Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. Anyone can go bankrupt.
Yeah, I am this evening in conversation with Scott Picken, who's the CEO and founder at Wealth Migrate. So one of the things that one of the assumptions that Scott has made is that 20 years ago, I was old enough to even think of property. 20 years ago, I was 11, and as much as surprisingly though, 20 years ago, we were, my family were building the family house, and I always tell people how I got introduced to property at a very young age. Mom bought a stand and our house got built. And so really got to see the stand transform from literally a stand, saw the house plan. So as early as sort of 8, 9 years old, literally saw how house plans work. I know how to draw doors, windows, the works on a house plan by hand because I just know how these things work. And so you're not far off the mark, but definitely wasn't looking at
Can I challenge you though? Can I challenge you? Guess what age my son invested in his first property?
Can you just repeat that?
Guess what age my son invested in his first property?
I already know you're probably going to say something sickening, like in his teens, because I know that real estate parents like nudging their kids to these sort of things. Let's hear what the age was. I'm guessing early to mid-teens at 5. Okay. So you'd have what?
And my point being is that everyone's got access now. So I agree with you. When you were 11 years old, again, the traditional thing was you were helping your parents build their house and learn about that. Fantastic, brilliant experience. But there's you couldn't have gone and bought a house when you were 11. It's impossible. You couldn't even got a mortgage. Now with technology, your children can be investing. I mean, my son started investing at 5. And, often people say Warren Buffett is as wealthy as he is because he started at 13. There's basically no excuse anymore for people not to get started.
I mean, starting as early as possible certainly is a really big perk. The compounding effect certainly does help quite significantly. And I want to go through some of the questions, the comments that we're getting at home, and so much love that we're getting on our Facebook page from the viewers at home. Anelda Everton, Michelle Vomarans, Butumelo Mutsabi, Glad Shirinda, Mo Rose Mtswane, watching us there on our Facebook page and sending all that love, absolutely appreciating it there. And before we go for a break, I actually want us to also go through some of the great comments that we received on that pinned post on our Facebook page that I was talking about earlier. And that's, of course, where you can share what kind of property insight advice you've picked up since watching the show, and you stand a chance of walking away with 500 rands in cash every single weekday. And I know that yesterday's winner was Messi Nikipindi, was indeed watching the show, so she claimed that cash. And this evening, we've got 500 rands in the money bag. And we've got here Ukutso Ramoshale saying, I've learned so much. I gained more knowledge from private property on live podcasts. Michelle Bolmer and saying, I've learned so much from your podcast. The following is a few of my favorites: location, negotiation, affordability, credit score, and costs involved. And of course, that's one of the big things. We share various kinds of insights to help you at different stage of your property journey. And the last one from Mallory Pether saying, Advice Center has everything you need to know about the South African real estate market. Get ahead of the game with private property. And that's, of course, the Advice Center that private property certainly has. So do make sure that you go to that pin post on our Facebook page and drop us some of the gems that you picked up while watching the show. I remember the tail end of last year having one of the viewers at home saying that just that year alone, they bought 5 properties, and they bought it because they'd been watching the show and they picked up different kinds of insights and lessons, and were able to even negotiate better with the bank and with the different purchases of the different sellers rather of the different properties that they bought. So that's certainly the impact that we know that we have with the many viewers at home, and we want to hear more from you when it comes to some of the things that you have picked up. But in the meantime, let's take a look at who the potential lucky winner this evening is of that 500 rands that is in the money bag. And when we come back from the break, we'll be continuing our conversation with Scott Picken from Wealth Migrate. And the lucky winner this evening is Manelza Mashobane. Mashobane, I would only assume Mashobane Kumalo. So, I hope that you are indeed watching and, of course, will be claiming that prize. So, Mashobane Mbulazo Mnyam, Mashobane, I do hope that you're watching and, of course, will be able to claim that prize. It's 500 rands up for grab this evening here on the Private Property Podcast with myself, Uzamantungwa Kumalo. And as we get back to our conversation on how technology is increasing opportunity and returns for investors, I'm joined by Scott Picken, the CEO and founder at Wealth Migrate. Now, Scott, I think let's then look at perhaps then some of the actual technologies that you're aware of. I think the one that you've already mentioned even before the break is, of course, the ability for us to be able to own real estate or invest rather in real estate in different ways. And the big one, of course, being fractional ownership and opening up the way that investors can access real estate in ways that you certainly didn't have 20 years back. And even myself, when I started off nearly a decade ago, the option really was I'm buying an apartment. I was buying apartments and there was no other alternative that I thought was possible for me. So when you look at some of those technologies or various systems that viewers at home can certainly use locally now, I think what would be some of those that you'd say are certainly opening up opportunities for viewers at home and, of course, ultimately increasing their returns?
Yeah, well, I'm not quite sure to understand your question better, because there's technologies that you can use, and it's a bit like the internet. Like, I could sit here for the next 10 minutes and explain to you how the internet works and kind of the technology behind it, but no one cares about that. Like, all they care about is that the internet works and they can go to Takealot and buy stuff on Takealot and it arrives at their house. Do you see what I'm trying to get at? Like, it's not about the technology that underpins what you're doing. It's about actually being able to get access to it. So as investors, one of the reasons that it dramatically reduces the risk and increases the returns is it cuts out the middlemen. So a metaphor that everyone understands already is Uber. Okay, before Uber came along, we would catch a taxi and it was very inefficient. It was difficult. You would phone a taxi owner operator. They would phone a taxi, driver. That 2 hours later, the taxi driver would pick you up. If you didn't know where you're going, the good chances are they'd take you in, a long way around and charge you lots of fees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Uber came along and literally what did it do? It cut out the middleman, it cut the costs, and it dramatically increased the trust, the transparency, and the accessibility. Well, technology is doing exactly the same thing within the property industry. So what is it doing? It's increasing the trust. So now, rather than trying to deal with relationships where it's your friends and it's human relationships, you can actually use technology in the same way that you choose to go on holiday or you stay in an Airbnb or you buy something online with e-commerce. You can actually trust your online peers when you're making an investment decision because you're getting that information. Secondly, you've got transparency. The old days, I'll never forget, funny enough, you talk about a REIT, and the REIT had lost 500 million rand, but yet when you read the small print on page 36 of the PPM, which stands for, I can't remember what a PPM stands for now, but anyway, it's a private placement memorandum, and it was like, had all the risks on page 36. Like, that was the old way of doing it. Hide the fees, hide the risk, and whereas transparency now, it's all above board. Like, exactly, this is what it is, this is how much money you're making, these are the costs, these are the returns. And then the increasing the accessibility, I think, is we've already discussed tonight because so many more people have access to it. Cutting out the middleman, that for me is an obvious one. Do you know that in property, Zama, if you invest in a property, on average, there's 16 different middlemen between you and your investment? 16. On average, you're paying between 12 and 15% extra for all the middlemen. Okay, and what technology does, just like Amazon does or Uber does or Apple does for music, whatever, it literally puts the property and you directly together. So it cuts out the middleman. And by virtue of that, it cuts out the costs. So I often joke with people, we've been helping people invest in commercial buildings in America since 2014, medical buildings to be specific. And our clients have earned an 8% plus cash on cash return. The American REIT in that sector is paying a 4.75%. And I always go, what's the difference? Are we better negotiators? Have we got cleverer people working at the company? It's none of that. All we've done is cut out all the middlemen. And rather than literally nearly 50% of your return being paid away to middlemen. It's now going into your pocket. And so I tend to, on purpose, dumb it down a little bit, where it's not what the technology is giving you from a tech perspective. It's what are you getting from what's important to solving your problems. And you and I as investors, what do we want? We want lower risk and we want higher return.
And Scott, I think one of the things then that, and I'd even asked this to your colleague earlier this week, is when we look at investors who then want to invest in real estate by using various companies and different other options, right? Whether it's yourselves as Wealth Migrate, or certainly looking at other people who have similar models when it comes to crowdfunding. Of course, some of them are not as don't have as much time in the industry as yourselves. How do they go about discerning which guys are even legit? Because I'm also seeing quite a lot of players coming on offering crowdfunding, we'll call it models, that unfortunately I'd say are not particularly above board. How do they go about sort of sifting through guys who know what they're doing and knowing that whether you're putting away 500 rands or you're putting away 100K towards that crowdfunding initiative for real estate, that they are in fact legitimate, your money is in safe hands, and all the perks that you've highlighted when it comes to the use of technology around transparency and trust are in fact going to be in place, as opposed to them finding somebody on the internet and thinking, okay, I think this is a great investment opportunity, but inevitably having their money unfortunately misused.
Zamar, I think it's a brilliant question, and I'll tell you why. Technology is an enabler. It's not a fix-all. Yep. So what does that mean? It enables the transaction. It makes it more efficient, but it doesn't fix. There's a great saying that I heard many years ago: you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. Okay, and what I mean by that is that you've still got to stick to the fundamentals of investing. The fundamentals of investing do not change. And if I was an investor and I was doing due diligence, there's three core things that I always recommend that people look at. Okay, the first one is, does the partner have a track record? Is this their first time, like trying to buy a house and renovate it, or do a new development, or buy a shopping center or whatever? Or have they been doing this for 10, 20, 30, 40 years? Because really, track record, again, we've all been through this. Would you take lessons from a baby that was literally learning to walk, or would you take lessons from an adult that's been doing it for 40 years? It's simple. The second one is, are they putting their own money into the deal? Okay, now, having helped investors invest over $1 billion around the world, and helped investors, in 170 countries, if there's one piece of advice I could say, is whoever you're partnering with, are they putting their own money in the deal? Because it is critically important that their money is being treated the same way as your money, because it really brings you to the third point, which is, are you aligned? Okay, are your interests aligned? Now, Zama, as an example, if you and me are going into business and you want to build a great company and I want to go surfing every day, like, is the business going to work?
No.
It's not going to work. We're not aligned.
Absolutely not going to work.
If we get married, okay, and you're marrying for love and I'm marrying for money, like, is it going to work? It's not going to work, okay?
Yeah.
Like, because we're not aligned.
I mean, look, we've seen many of those kinds of that's probably not the best example that you can use. We see too many of those. Sometimes they do inevitably end, but sometimes both parties just come to terms with the fact that you married me for love and I married you for money, and we still have, the thing we came here for, we're still getting from each other.
Well, then by that analogy, then they're aligned, because they were aligned, in the beginning. But what I'm trying to get at is that if you deal with the average transaction where you've got a broker or an agent up front that is just making a commission, and then you're putting your money in and you're expecting a return and a long-term return, you're not aligned, because they're making a short-term gain, a commission, and you're wanting to make long-term returns. You're not aligned. It won't work. I guarantee you it won't work. And if you look back at some of the massive problems around this country, the likes of Sharemax as an example, they were taking 26% on the front end, up front. Okay, you're not aligned. Like, if you invested 100 Rand, they took 26 Rand in fees and only 74 Rand was being invested. So just to keep it simple, back to your, because I don't want to talk too much for people, I want to just make it really simple. It's three things. Has the partner done and got the ability to do due diligence? Have they got extensive track record? 2 is, have they got their own money in the deal? And 3 is, are your interests aligned long term? And honestly, if you can't tick those 3 boxes, technology will not solve any other problem.
And I think that's just such a big, investment fundamental, as you're saying, that this isn't even about technology or about real estate, but it's a fundamental that you can use with any kind of investment decision in general, especially with various players sort of coming on into the scene across different kinds of asset classes. And some of them, unfortunately, are, to put it bluntly, scamming people. And I think we need to be, quite upfront with it. Other players have been in the industry. They've, stress tested their model and now have various things in place, various systems in place to enable really great investment. And I think as viewers at home, as consumers, as much as on the one hand, people want to be able to invest in real estate or invest in general and have returns for themselves or for their children, it's also so crucial to understand that when certain things seem too good to be true, it probably is, because more often than not, a lot of these players are also offering insane returns that you're not going to get anywhere, regardless of how good they say that they are. You're just not going to be getting those kinds of returns. So if somebody's saying they're going to get 30% return in 6 months, nobody's giving you that kind of return. So you almost have to, alarm bells almost have to go off, even for you at home. And it's such an important thing for so many of us to always be aware of. And, Scott,
just quickly, I just want to back you up there because, this is the most important thing is that, and this is why the regulator gets so scared when technology comes to these industries and whatever, because yes, there are a lot of scams out there. So stick to the fundamentals. Like as an example, you spoke to our chief investment officer 2 nights ago. Like we regulate it. Like that in itself says a lot. Does that make sense? And but please, ladies and gentlemen, what you said there, and I want to reiterate it for people. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And by the way, I love cryptocurrency. But if you think you're getting a 5 to 10% return per month for the rest of your life, then you've got to ask yourself why Investec is not putting all of its money into that product.
Yeah, why any of the big players aren't putting, all their money into those products is also just because of how volatile, unfortunately, it is. And, Scott, as we wrap up our conversation this evening, what are some of your, I'll say, expectations or certainly your projections about when we look at not just the use of tech, but certainly tech as an enabler in real estate for South African investors in general, and some of the opportunities going forward for them that are potentially out there. I think one of the great things, COVID has had many people at home looking and relooking different ways to earn a little bit extra and to make their rand stretch as much as possible, and always trying to find different pockets of ways to invest. So for yourselves going forward, what are some of the perhaps expectations or projections that you foresee for real estate investors in general, in particular?
There's 2 words that I really want to epitomize for people. The one is freedom and the one is global citizen. And, I'm very passionate. We as a team are very passionate about helping people create freedom in their lives. Now, again, I don't care where they want to go send their children to school or go to university or where they want to live or, if they want to donate their money to church or whatever. But what I do care about is that they've got the freedom to be able to do that. And nowadays, you cannot rely on your government. It doesn't matter where you live in the world. And the financial industry and the pension plans and everything, they're just not working. It's you just have to look at everyone else. So take control of your own life. And what we're passionate about is that freedom. And how does one get freedom? It's by passive income. And so, passive income is where you own assets and they pay you money while you sleep. And my real invitation to people is you not only now can get a passive income in rands, but you can get it in dollars, you can get it in pounds, you can get it in euros. And there's nothing better than living in South Africa, in this beautiful, beautiful country. I'm very passionate South African, but earning a foreign income from around the world. And that truly allows you to become a global citizen. And I know, Zama, that many people on your webinar right now, on your podcast, have immediately switched off and gone, that's not possible. That's only for really wealthy people. And I challenge them because you can get started from 1,500 Rand which is in literally the realm of virtually everybody. And so it's a mindset. Becoming a global citizen is a mindset. Having freedom in your lifestyle is a mindset. And all you have to do is get started. And I tell you, once you've taken that first step, just like I've got my son going at 5, it's very hard to turn that around, because, financial freedom is like a utopia a lot of people talk about. And I'm not promising financial freedom. What I'm promising is just freedom, full stop freedom. And how do you get freedom? Well, it starts with your mindset. Then you get knowledge. Then you get access to investments. You build a system, and ultimately you get that passive income. And my invitation to everyone is to walk this road, because you can take control of your life. There is no get-rich-quick scheme, but the technology is there now to enable you to have that freedom in your life. And so it's an invitation, but I will leave you with one caveat. You don't have an excuse anymore, because every single person can invest like the top 1%, and therefore you've got a responsibility to you and your family.
And I want to wrap up with the last 2 comments from our viewers at home on our Facebook page. We've got Rose and Zwana saying, yes, I'm a firm believer of diverse investment. I cannot put all my eggs in one basket. And Menzi Butile is saying the US comes and taxes you. I felt it last month. Look, Menzi, one of the big things, the tax man is always going to get you. I see Scott wanting to come in. The tax man in any country, any context, and I say this as a blanket statement. But Scott, do you want to come in there with the comment around the US coming to tax you?
Well, 2 comments. Firstly, if you're paying tax, you're making a profit. So, the only time you don't pay tax is when you're making a loss. So trust me, you want to be making a profit. And the second thing is that using our platform, you don't have to become an expert in offshore structures and everything else. We take care of all of that for you. We've paid literally hundreds of thousands of dollars around the world to be as tax efficient as possible. So I think it was Budelezi that said that. My suggestion is come and use a platform where you've got a huge amount of global experience coming in one place and allowing you to safely and simply invest.
And Scott, we're going to leave it there this evening. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's such a pleasure to have you with us.
Awesome. Thanks for being online. And hopefully everyone tonight takes away your most important message. Technology is not a fix-all. It can reduce the risk and it can increase the returns. But don't be stupid. You've got to make sure the people in the platform know what they're doing.
It's an enabler. It's not a silver bullet that fixes everything. And I think we always need to be mindful of that, regardless of which industry we are talking about. And that is, of course, Scott Picken, who is the CEO and founder at Wealth Migrate, wrapping up the Thursday edition of the Private Property Podcast with myself, Uzamandungwa Kumalo. Unfortunately, Manelza Mashobane was not live watching us. And the team had actually let me know that it was 1,000 rands that was in the money bag. So meaning tomorrow we've got 1,500 rands in the money bag. Remember, if you've commented on that post on our Facebook page, all you have to do is to make sure that you watch us live in order to claim your prize. Well, that's it for myself, Uzamandungwa Kumalo, and the rest of the Private Property Podcast team. We'll be back on the screens tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Do stay tuned for Mbalino on the Farming Podcast at 8. Until then, hoping you're staying home and staying safe.
That's on.